a fan favorite by many. Almost Got Him is a great episode, but is it as good as people make it out to be? We're going to talk about it right now. Hello friends, welcome back to the show, and thanks for joining me once again to talk about Batman the Animated Series. Today we're talking about Almost Got Him, which originally aired for Batman the Animated Series on November 10th, 1992.
I want a nice clean game, gentlemen.
If you're like me and grew up with Batman the Animated Series, which turned you into a huge Batman fan today, like me, then this is the show for you. We're going to talk about each and every episode and have been talking about the episodes on the 25th anniversary of their original air date. If you're new here or just haven't yet subscribed to the channel, please do. I hope that you'll click that little button and you can be part of our ongoing community of Batman the Animated Series fans.
Yeah, well, that's where you're wrong. I don't think it is one guy.
Also, stick around to the end so you can see where I rank this episode in my favorite episodes so far. I think it might surprise you. Almost Got Him is a fan favorite. I see it pop up in top 10 lists all the time. And it is a really neat episode. It features a lot of villains and it shows them in maybe a different light than what we normally see. And it has a really inventive story structure. But I want to talk about some details of this episode that I don't think many people are talking about. But first, I want to put up the 60-second Joker bomb on the screen. I'm giving myself 60 seconds. People keep mentioning this, that I should just bump it up. I think everybody just feels sorry for me that I can't do it in 45. I'm going to try my best to get it done in 60 seconds, but I think it's still going to be hard. We open up on a poker game with all the big villains in the room. Killer Croc, Joker, Penguin, Two-Face, Poison Ivy, Killer Croc. Did I say that one already? And they are playing poker and they're talking about their stories of how they almost got Batman. And we hear Poison Ivy's story. We hear Penguins. We hear Two-Faces. We hear Croc, who was just hit him with a big rock. And then Joker, his latest run-in was just the night before, and he hooked Batman up to this machine that was like a late-night talk show, and every time that people laughed, it shocked him, and he was only saved when Catwoman came in. And then when he ends the story, Killer Croc starts asking him, well, what'd you do with Catwoman? Did you let her go? And he said, no, that's the best part. She's being turned into cat food right now as we speak. And then we find out that Killer Croc is actually Batman. He reveals himself, and now he's with all these villains, but everybody else in the room was cops and police with guns. And so Batman goes where Harley is holding Catwoman at the cat food factory, and he helps her escape. And then she goes, oh, maybe we could get dinner together or something. And he goes, well, maybe not. And then she turns around and he disappears, and she has the final line of, I almost got him. What'd I tell you? See, it doesn't matter. I could put 5 minutes up there. I still won't be able to get it.
You've only got time for one.
I've mentioned it before, but I love these episodes that kind of take a different approach to storytelling. And I feel like the writers of this show really had a lot of leadway and a lot of trust to be able to try these different kinds of ideas rather than just a linear 3-act structure story. They're able to kind of take a little bit of liberties and play around with kind of a different way to tell a story. And this one is no exception. First of all, just the premise of having all the villains gather together for a poker game is kind of neat. I love the direction that this opens up, where we only establish the characters by their hands. They show their hands holding the cards, and we are able to get who they are. There's also some great visual gags in that. We see that Two-Face is using half and half. We see Penguin is using tea. We see Joker cheating right away. So those elements are really kind of cool to establish this scene. Once again, poor Penguin. I think this is now the 3rd episode he was featured in. Prior to this, he was also in a group with The Strange Secret of Bruce Wayne. And then prior to that, he was getting beat up by a bunch of kids in Batman. I've Got Batman in My Basement. So we have yet to have like a quality Penguin episode.
But for sheer criminal genius, none surpasses my most recent ornithologically inspired entoilment.
Smaller words, please. You're losing Croc.
Again, it seems like the opportunity is there for Riddler to be in this group. And maybe this is just me, but when I think of Batman villains, it is Joker, Penguin, and Riddler. Like, those are the top three. And maybe that goes back to the old 70s cartoon, Super Friends kind of thing. But that was the lineup. That was the villains. I feel like Killer Croc, Poison Ivy, Two-Face even is kind of, they're secondary.
I know mine's the best, but let's hear yours anyway.
And I remember when I was watching the show as a kid, I loved the episodes with the Riddler. And apparently there weren't that many, or at least they didn't come until later. I just find that strange that he's not there once again. Why didn't they invite Wormwood? Wormwood should have been there playing poker.
Get me an herbal tea and deal me in.
Scram, lady. This is a private.
It's fun to hear these different stories of how they almost got him. They're very dynamically different. Poison Ivy with the pumpkins that are exploding and the gas, and Penguin trapping Batman in his what do you call it? Atrium, Big Bird Sanctuary.
My aviary of doom.
Aviary of what?
And they do kind of increasingly get better and better. Two-Face is a very themed gimmick, which is sort of a throwback to the old 60s Batman, where he puts him on a coin, a giant penny, and he flips him up in the air, and which side he's going to land on and how he gets out of that. Which I think is neat, too, that they mention what happened to the giant penny. And
They actually let him keep it.
that is seen in the Batcave throughout. I know you can see it in the comic books, you can see it in the series, and it's kind of neat to reference that in this episode. That's where that came from. There's also a giant T-Rex in his cave. I once knew the story where that came from, but I don't.
Of course.
Likewise. You got it. Same here.
So they all have these really clever devices, and that part of the episode is really fun to see those, how they share their stories of how they almost got him. And it is very appropriate. That's probably what the villains would sit around talking about. And I love the idea of that all the villains hang out and swap stories. And Joker's story about having the late night talk show and Batman being captured and tied to that electric chair that's powered by laughter, that's fascinating. And I think that on its own could have made a great episode. Catwoman comes in and saves him, which is a great surprise, and ends up being the reason for this episode. That Batman was disguised as Killer Croc to get the information from the Joker of where Catwoman is. And it's kind of that she saved him, so now he's going to go save her. And again, plays with that idea that Catwoman's sort of good, sort of bad, kind of in that middle.
Well, I'd like to think our relationship isn't just restricted to saving each other from freaks and weirdos.
But this is an episode that, like I said, that I see pop up in people's top 10 lists all the time. I don't know if I've ever seen it at the top or to be anybody's absolute favorite episode, but I challenge that. Whereas this episode is a lot of fun and it's very enjoyable to watch. There's some definite highlights, but that for me is kind of where it stops. It's just a fun episode. It's very lighthearted. It's very comical.
It was a big rock.
The episodes that really populate my top 10 list in general is either a high nostalgic factor or just those great stories, the great mysteries, those great detective film noir kind of style Batman going through some really serious challenges. Whereas this one is just sort of, it's more fluff. When I watched it today, it was fun and it was entertaining.
Didn't I say there's more than one way to get someone?
So when it came time to rank this episode, like I said, it wasn't at the top of my list, but it also wasn't the bottom. It was a very entertaining episode. It wasn't boring. There was great variety in it. There's great villains, and to have another excuse for all the villains to be in one episode. And like I said, just kind of a different style story of all the villains sitting around a card table talking is entertaining. So I honestly thought going into this that this episode would probably end up in my top 10, but as I started looking at the list of what is up there, it actually fell below the top 10 into the number 13 slot of my favorite episodes so far. The story structure is neat, but the story itself, when you strip it all away, other than the villains swapping the stories of how they almost got him, the story is really Catwoman saved Batman, so Batman's trying to get information to go save her. And even when he arrives at the factory, it's just Harley Quinn there. And it isn't like there's a huge battle with all the henchmen or the 2-ton gang that Two-Face mentions earlier. It's just he shuts the power off. And that's it.
Good call. Help!
When you think of the Batman villains, I'd like to know what your list of villains are. How do you rank the villains just in kind of the first ones that come to mind? What are the first 3 or first 5 that you think of when we talk about the Batman villains? Like I said, for me, it's Joker, Penguin, Riddler, Two-Face, Catwoman. And not necessarily that those are my favorite villains, but just those are the ones that come to mind as the most iconic villains. Let me know in the comments below what your kind of short list of your top villains that you think of when we talk about Batman.
Show's over, Joker.
If you enjoyed this episode, please click the like button. And if you want to see more of these episodes as they come out, then be sure to hit the subscribe. Tomorrow on November 11th, we have another episode coming up, Moon of the Wolf. So be sure to check back and see that one. As always, I'm Andy Knode. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.